The world has two competing narratives for what it means to be a man. Charlie Kirk rejected both of them and set an example for young men everywhere to follow. Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Now, we are on YouTube if you prefer to watch instead of just listen. YouTube.com/@sharpening-arrows, YouTube.com/sharpening-arrows, /@sharpening-arrows. So you can tell I'm an old man. Can't even get the web address right. Now, this is a bit of a unique podcast because I encourage families to listen together. You're welcome, obviously, to listen by yourself, but parents, I encourage you to put it on a speaker, to share the AirPods, listen to it with your teenager, and stop and discuss. Remember, you are your teen's most important teacher. I hope that this podcast is a tool to facilitate discussion. I hope there's some insights in here. But the most important thing, and teens, this goes for you too. I know there's a pulling away as you become older, and that's natural and good. But your parents have a lot of wisdom, and I encourage you to discuss it, to disagree. Remember, disagreement isn't a disaster. Just means we have different opinions about things. We can be respectful. We can talk about it. We can sort through it. And even if we continue to disagree, that's okay. And in fact, that's one of the things that Charlie Kirk showed by going into some of the most hostile places in the country for conservatives and simply having a respectful conversation. It's still hard to think about the fact that Charlie Kirk was assassinated for giving his political opinion. The left couldn't shout him off of campuses, and so they shot him off of campuses, and it's still devastating. And there's a lot to say about the political fallout, about what needs to happen to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And I think that conversation is important. I've written about that in my role as a columnist for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. But before getting into that, I actually want to look today at Charlie's life and see what lessons it has for young men. Now, I still think there's some interesting or valuable stuff for young women, but today we're going to be talking about manhood. So let's have a pause point right there. What does it mean to be a man? Now, I hope you really do stop and discuss that question, because I'm not looking for a biological definition. We can all define man in a biological sense, what it means to be an adult human male, have an XY chromosomes. But there's more to it than that. In fact, there's a great debate in our culture about manhood, about how men should act, about what they should do. Now, if you've been listening for a while, then you know that I start with the side of the argument that I personally disagree with. And as I said when I started this show, if you want to debate like Charlie Kirk did, if you want to ask questions like Allie Beth Stuckey, you have to understand the argument of your opponent. And so we're going to start with arguments for the wrong side. What does it mean to be a man? Argument one. Well, it means acting like a woman. Because don't you know, masculinity is toxic. This is how WebMD defines it. And I want to point out WebMD, you've probably used WebMD if you've had a headache, or if you're a parent and your child has fallen. How serious is this? This is not a crazy site. WebMD. This is what they say. Toxic masculinity is an attitude or set of social guidelines stereotypically associated with manliness that often have a negative impact on men, women, and society in general. Oh, you don't want that, do you? You don't want things that negatively impact other people? The phrase toxic masculinity was later adopted by the fourth wave of feminism, a wave that started about a decade ago. This wave focused more on intersectionality than the waves before it. Intersectionality is the idea that sexism is just one part of systemic oppression, along with ableism, ageism, classism, homophobia, and racism. So moving in to more of the definition, a need for control. You see, men have for too long simply wanted to control things. They've wanted to assert their power and their dominance. That's not healthy. People need to be able to express themselves and not be controlled. Toxic masculinity, promiscuity. Well, that's bad. Look at what the Bible says. It says sex outside of a man and a woman in marriage is sinful. Masculinity pushes men to be promiscuous. Toxic masculinity means men aren't supposed to help with the household duties. They just leave it to the women. They say, "Oh, it's women's work. It's not for me as a man." Toxic masculinity means risk-taking. Again, this is from WebMD. Obviously, I'm interlacing some of my commentary in here. Taking risk and suppressing fear is another feature of toxic masculinity. And so is stoicism. A cornerstone idea of toxic masculinity is that showing emotion is weak and feminine. Men are expected to be mentally and physically tough without breaking. Well, see, this isn't good because everyone has emotions. Even men have emotions. I promise. And it's not good just to stuff those emotions. In our society, for too long, the masculine culture that we are in has just forced men to stuff their emotions or be accused of being weak or feminine. And that's not healthy. That's not good for men. With their over-competitive nature, men sow destruction. They promote sexism. Look at all of the Me Too movement. That was masculinity out of control. If only men were more like women, in touch with their emotions and caring and wanting to nurture other people, we'd have harmony and discussion. That's what men should be like. All right, that's one argument. Second argument, before we get there, let's have a pause point. What have you heard about Andrew Tate? Now, parents, if you don't know, he is extremely popular online with young men. And he presents the other version of masculinity. Andrew Tate says, well, men aren't women. We can all see that. We all know that. And men are supposed to dominate. Instead of being feminine, they run in the other direction and they embrace all of the stereotypes of masculinity. It means physical dominance and strengths. It means having physical encounters with gorgeous women, as many as possible, without commitment. Being a man means money, fast cars, big houses. It means fame and power. These are the things men are supposed to want. These are the things men are hardwired to want. These are the things that men have wanted for centuries. That's simply how God made men. He made them different from women. And so when the culture says that men should be weak, no, men should be strong. Men should use women, not be in relationship with women. Men are supposed to compete and win. That's what it means to be a man. Let's have another pause point here. What's appealing about Tate's argument? And if you aren't a young man, what do you think is appealing about Tate's argument to young men, especially in a broader culture that pushes men to be more feminized? As you think about that, let me tell you about Mama Bear Prayers, a podcast for moms who are knee-deep in dishes and training their teens. Whether you are in the carpool lane or the coffee line, host Charity Rios wants to come alongside you and help you grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. Now, as every parent knows, raising teens and children in general can feel a bit like a ping pong game. You bounce from moments of joy to moments of deepest concern. Combined with the busyness of life, this back and forth can leave you feeling overwhelmed and even isolated. As the mom of 4 busy boys, Charity knows this firsthand, and it's why she created Mama Bear Prayers, to support moms who are on the journey of raising kids. Now, I may not be the target audience for Mama Bear Prayers podcast, But I have been encouraged as Charity dives into Scripture, shares her insight, and most importantly, prays. God works through prayer. So check out Mama Bear Prayers today. All right. Before we get into a rebuttal of those two arguments, let's ask this pause point. Would either rejecting toxic masculinity or Andrew Tate's version of masculinity make someone a good man? So put it another way. If you have a man who does everything he can to reject toxic masculinity, or a man who does everything he can to live like Andrew Tate, would you describe him as a good man? Well, I most definitely would not. Because while both sides get some things right, they both miss something important. I want you to think of it like this. I live in Las Vegas. A few hours away, there's a national park called Zion National Park. Just a beautiful example of God's handiwork. One of the hikes in Zion is a hike called Angel's Landing. You hike up about 1,500 feet, and you get to what the trail takes you to a spot that is essentially uh, a narrow pathway, so narrow that there's chains there for you to hold on, and a few feet to the left is a 1,500-foot drop off, and a few feet to the right is a 1,500-foot drop off. As someone who is afraid of heights, it is terrifying. Somehow, with the Lord's help, I made it through. But I made it through not by going to the left or to the right, but by staying on the straight and narrow path. And when I think about the world's version of masculinity, that's what I think of. Because when you're on that path at Angel's Landing, going to the left is like the world's version of saying, reject toxic masculinity. Men should be women. But off to the right is Andrew Tate's version of masculinity, of just doing everything stereotypically that a man would. Both of those paths are going to lead to destruction. And you have to be careful, teens, because sometimes it's very easy to see that, oh, the world is telling men to be women. That's wrong. And then feel like I have to run all the way to the other side. Well, there's Andrew Tate. He's definitely telling me that men are not women. He must be right. No, no, no. Just because he's right about the wrongness of the world saying that men should be women doesn't mean that he's right. You've got to stay on that path. And again, that's one of the wonderful things about the Bible is that straight and narrow path. So toxic masculinity is right that characteristics of masculinity can be destructive if taken to an extreme. And Tate is right that men are not women. What feminists miss is that men have unique gifts. And what Tate misses is that those gifts need to be directed to the right purpose. I'm going to say that again. What I think is true, I think the Bible teaches, what I think we see in Charlie Kirk's life, is that men have unique gifts, but those gifts should be directed to the right purpose. So let's talk about this. What makes a good man? Well, there's a wonderful book called Raising a Modern Day Knight by a man named Robert Lewis that I think is tremendous and I think does just a really, really great job of answering this question. And some of my children may be making an appearance on the YouTube. So this is a reason to listen to the podcast. You don't have to see my children photobomb the show. But let's talk about, what does it mean to be a man? What is a biblical definition of manhood? One, and again, this is from Raising a Modern Day Knight by Robert Lewis. One, reject passivity. I want you to think about Genesis 3. What was man's first mistake? Hey, buddy. Yeah. Everyone, you want to come say hi? All right, come say hi. Wave. All
Hi.
right, now you gotta go. Okay, Cammy, you gotta go too. I know. Oh, you're gonna come say hi? Okay. All right. I'm telling you, with 7 kids, it was going to happen. The kids were going to photobomb. All right, so Genesis 3, man's first mistake. I don't mean mankind. I mean a man, the first mistake by a man. Eve is being tempted by the serpent. She takes the fruit, and then what does she do? She hands it to Adam, who was standing there. Do you get that? There's the devil tempting Eve, and Adam's like, "Yeah, I'm not sure. You go first." And that passivity, well, I mean, changed the course of human history, but it's also something that men are tempted with. Just go along. Charlie Kirk simply did not do that. He didn't go along. And I want you to think about this in terms of not just an action, but an attitude. What does the culture say? Oh, just go along. Just go along with whatever the culture is saying. You don't have to think for yourself. Just accept the attitudes that you see from Hollywood or you hear in your music. No, Charlie Kirk didn't do that. He rejected passivity. He engaged with the worldviews of the culture. He found them lacking because he compared them to the Bible, and he did something about it. This is a Charlie Kirk quote from 2024, talking to Russell Brand. I mean, I'm nothing without Jesus. I'm a sinner. I fall incredibly short of the glory of God. We all do. I gave my life to the Lord in 5th grade, and it's the most important decision I've ever made, and everything I do incorporates Jesus Christ. Another Kirk quote. Many textbooks fail to present students with both sides of an issue. Students are being pushed toward an education that demonizes free enterprise. Tegan, you're making noise. That demonizes free enterprise while advocating top-down government, deficit spending, and class warfare. Kirk didn't go along with the culture. He didn't just sit there passively. He thought about it. That's what I want to encourage you to do, is to think about it. Second characteristic of a godly man, accepts responsibility. Now we see this in the Bible in Matthew 25. There's the parable of the talents. A man's traveling to a far country, calls his servants, and he gives them money to look after while he's gone. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, another 1, each according to his ability. Now, a talent here is a unit of money, not a talent as we would describe it. He goes away, he returns, and the one who had 5 talents went and made 5 more talents. The one who had 2 went and gained 2 more, but the one who had 1 went and dug it in the ground and hid it. And what happens when the master returns? He rewards those who have used the gifts, the talents that they were entrusted with, and they use those for their master's purposes. To in this parable, to make money, but the gifts that God has given you, the point is simply not just to make money. So what does Charlie Kirk do? He's a nobody. He has a vision. At 18, to start an organization called Turning Point that's going to go engage students on college campuses with conservative ideas. Think about how ludicrous this is. Here is a kid, a teenager, who hasn't been to college, who says he's going to change the world by starting organizations on college campuses. He accepted responsibility. He went and he did it. This is from a PBS write-up. Kirk later admitted that he had, quote, no money, no connections, and no idea what I was doing, end quote, when he started Turning Point USA in 2012. By using his rhetorical gifts for countering progressive ideas, by leaning into cultural tensions, that's just code for addressing issues the left doesn't want people to talk about. He did things that resonated with college audiences and with donors. He went out and did something. He rejected passivity. He accepted responsibility. Now, I'm not saying that you have to found an organization that's going to employ thousands of people, that's going to shape the course of world history. That's not the responsibility that God has given almost any of us, but he has given you something. And as a man, you need to take responsibility for what it is. And I want to point something out, a lesson that I hope my own children learn. But but the habits that you develop now as teenagers, those matter. You don't just suddenly turn 18 and then you get all the adult habits. No, the habits that you are developing now with your homework, with keeping your room clean, with waking up on time, with doing the dishes, those habits carry over to when you are an adult and when you are doing greater things, when you need to be a man. Those are the habits that you need to have developed to accomplish what God has for you. Third characteristic of being a godly man: lead courageously. And we certainly see this in the Bible, Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Here's what Charlie Kirk had to say about this. If you believe in something, you need to have the courage to fight for those ideas, not run away from them or try to silence them. Lead courageously. And we see this in his work as a leader, as someone who led Turning Point. And so I want to ask you, what is it that you need to lead? What is it that you need to build? What is it that you need to create? Now, I think sometimes when people hear this idea of lead, they just think about the person at the top. Oh, well, to be a leader, I have to be like Charlie Kirk. To be a leader, I have to be the pastor. To be the leader, I have to be the one in charge. Look, not many of us are going to be in charge of a large organization, but all of us can take a leadership role somewhere. And as a man, you need to do it. Now, if you have a chance to work with a dynamic, incredible, godly leader, don't feel like you're selling out your leadership abilities because you're working under another godly leader. Organizations need leaders throughout the organization, not just at the top. And a second thing that I thought Kirk did that I think is worth pointing out is that Kirk didn't just worry about promoting himself or just think that, well, if this organization is going to be successful, if I'm going to change the country, it's all about me. One of the amazing things that happened after Kirk's death was the number of people who came out and talked about how Charlie used his platform to promote them. One of them was J.D. Vance. This is what he wrote on X. Charlie was one of the first people I called when I thought about running for Senate in early 2021. I was interested but skeptical there was a pathway. We talked through everything from the strategy to the fundraising to the grassroots of the movement that he knew so well. He introduced me to some of the people who would run my campaign and also to Donald Trump Jr. Don took a call from me because Charlie asked him to. Long before I ever committed, even in my mind, to running, Charlie had me speak to his donors at a TPUSA event. He walked around the room and introduced me. He gave me honest feedback on my remarks. He had no reason to do this, no expectation that I'd go anywhere. I was polling at that point well below 5%. He did it because we were friends and because he was a good man. And I have to say, this is also a mark of a strong leader, is they identify other leaders and they try and help them. This is another story from Data Republican, who does a lot of incredible data work on X. And she wrote this after Erica Kirk spoke last week. Erica's part about Charlie finding the talent, even the 5% that didn't believe in themselves, and pushing them to their fullest potential made me cry so hard. Because that one felt so personal. I was on medical leave when I started loosely doing early voting data, and Jeremy Carl introduced me to him. Imagine this. I was a low follower, deaf nobody. By all rights, it should have ended right there. Charlie somehow, almost immediately, saw something in me that nobody else did and pushed me the entire election season. Even though he had his own number guys, he asked me questions, statistics, demographics. I answered. Then immediately he started pushing me for more, and I did. And he just built me up bit by bit, dangling retweets, encouraging a little more each time. Tegan, please don't touch the table. We got pretty deep that season because he wanted to know all the numbers. And when election day rolled around, he just kind of assumed you give me the numbers all evening. I keep replaying those conversations and crying, end quote. So I just want to encourage you, don't feel threatened by other leaders who are working on the same cause as you are. Build them up. Another area where Charlie was a leader was in his marriage. Erica, his wife, has talked about how Charlie was the spiritual leader in their home. What does that look like? Pray. Read the Bible alone and as a family. Take your family to church. Lead them in devotions. Talk about spiritual things. Charlie talked about the importance of having children. Having children is more important than having a good career. My kids matter more than how many social media followers I have, Kirk once said. So Kirk didn't just lead in his organizations, he led in his family. Fourth characteristic of a godly man, live for a greater reward. Charlie definitely did this. He lived his life on purpose. Reminds me of the verse in Matthew 6:20. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. Charlie talked about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. He pointed people there. Even as he grew rich, famous, and powerful, he kept coming back to the most important thing, to the Lord. So what does it mean to be a godly man? I think we see these 4 principles in Charlie's life, and these are principles that you can emulate, that you can work on right now as a teenage young man. These are the principles that will turn you in, with the Lord's help, into a godly man that will bless those around you, most importantly, your wife and future children. So 1, reject passivity. 2, accept responsibility. 3, lead courageously. And 4, live for a greater reward. So let's have our final pause point here. And let me ask this to young women, if you are listening. Is this the type of young man you'd want to marry? And for young men, let me ask you this. What is one habit or routine you can establish today to become more like this? And who are you going to tell and ask to hold you accountable to that routine? Right? We have to reject passivity. We can't just say, oh, I'll get to it eventually. No, take responsibility. Do it now. Lead courageously. Step out. Keeping in mind that we're doing this for the Lord's glory, to use the gifts that He has given us. If you want to know what it means to be a godly man, look at Charlie Kirk. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and Christian community. Stay sharp, be courageous like Charlie, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.